I think we can get started.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening and a warm welcome to all for today's session. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. My name is Raghu, and I'm part of sales team at PromptCloud. To set the context here, it's difficult to keep up with consumer behavior and demand since no two shoppers show the same patterns while shopping. We call it as a non-linear shopping trend. Today, we are about 4.9 billion people as we speak, who use the internet, and around at least a billion people who shop online daily. So that resulted, in phenomenal rise in omni-channel buyers, porting intuitive and spontaneous shopping moments throughout the day. Hence, in this webinar, we're going to discuss more on the B2C landscape and consumer trends at a global and national level, and a few more insights that our speakers has in store for us. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Sukesh Chande, who heads sales at PromptCloud, managing both web crawling solutions and our flagship product, JobSpeaker. He has been with PromptCloud for 6 years now and has a tremendous experience in building SaaS products and contributing to holistic product growth. Our next speaker is Pavan, who is a sales manager, and he's been with PromptCloud for more than 2 years now. He's instrumental in exploring the new business opportunities in B2C space and holds expertise into discovering new strategies for business development. During the course of the webinar, we also have a Q&A session, where you can drop us your queries in the Q&A box or chat window, and we can take it up at the end of the session. All right, so I would now invite Pavan to take it up from here and talk more on the global perspective on the e-commerce.
Sure. Thanks, Raghu, for the kind introduction. Well, thanks, everyone. First of all, good evening to everyone, and thanks for taking out time and joining the session. Really appreciate your time. Hopefully, this session will have some insights for you to take away on the B2C landscape and some of the things that we've been kind of researching for a few months now. Well, the pandemic has accelerated a lot of changes that are already in place. The B2C landscape in India is no exception to this. In a lighter terms, in cricketing terminology, while it's a free hit to a lot of digital brands, online marketplaces and companies which are primarily online retail focused, the flip side of the coin is it's a googly to a lot of offline retail focused companies who struggled a lot during this period due to on and off lockdowns that we witnessed. The changes and trends are plenty, and this session is a small attempt to understand some of those macro and micro trends and how the companies and the brands are generally coping up in this new e-commerce order that we are witnessing. So the broad agenda for the session is we intend to start out with a complete zoom out view to understand the global perspective and how the retail and e-commerce share of retail is shaping up pre and post pandemic, and the future projections for the e-commerce and online sales across the globe. And then we will be slowly zooming into the other side of the spectrum with India-focused specific consumer trends and comprehend how the consumers in India are shopping online and what is their shopping behavior as such. And then slowly we move to the brands and companies dimension and understand what brands in India needs to do to stay in this competitive race to win the consumer. And then possibly to get the complete picture, we end with the potential roadblocks or challenges to the Indian B2C story. My colleague Sukesh will be taking care of the consumer trends and what brands needs to do, and I'll be taking care of the global perspective and end with the potential roadblocks. Let's start with the global perspective. And the pandemic year has given a lot of tailwind to e-commerce sales across the globe. While the e-commerce side of the retail sales at an aggregated level, at a global level, has gone up nearly 26% during the pandemic year 2020-2021. The same period, the offline retail sales have plunged to nearly minus 7% approximately. As we look into the future, most of the research reports that we've kind of gathered has kind of projecting the similar kind of a trend as we look into the future, where the growth rates are expected to moderate for online e-commerce sales to around 10%, while the offline retail sales are expected to grow at lower single digits. The total e-commerce sales in 2021, it stands at roughly about $4.9 trillion, which is around 19% of the total retail sales across the globe, and is expected to reach broadly around 23 to 25% of the total retail sales by 2025. As we move forward, we'd like to present a tale of two charts that signifies the Chinese dominance in the e-commerce retail space. The right chart is some kind of a continuation to the first slide. If you drill down the total e-commerce sales and understand how each country is doing, we found out that China contributes nearly 50% of the total $4.9 trillion e-commerce sales that we have seen in 2021, whereas US is not even half of China's contribution. In absolute figures, again, broadly in broad terms, US is about roughly, it contributed to roughly about $800 billion in online sales in 2021, whereas China has done nearly $2.5 trillion USD in online sales. In this case, it is interesting to note that US is not even doing half of what e-commerce sales the China is doing in 2021. The delta maybe here is too big to ignore. The left side of the chart is more of a reinforcement, where the e-commerce share of the retail sales in China is close to about 46 to 50%, which means that 50% of the retail sales is happening in China is coming from the online channels. That's massive. It just suggests that the country is far ahead in terms of the technology adoptions. For example, I mean, just want to take a couple of case in points where WeChat, we understand how the payment infrastructure is kind of works seamlessly across different applications, and few other e-commerce tech adoptions, whether we talk about the likes of social commerce and live commerce. The kind of numbers China is doing in these new areas are way ahead than the rest of the world. It's interesting to see US is languishing at about 7th place, maybe around 16% of their total retail sales is coming from e-commerce. The takeaways for us from this data is that while it may not be surprising that China is ahead of US in some of the e-commerce tech adoptions are concerned, because China is as big as US now in terms of the economy is concerned. But what's surprising is the delta, the difference with how much they're ahead in terms of competing nation like US, for example. As we move forward and understand where does India stand, some of the recent research reports that's done by BCG, Boston Consulting Group, and eMarketer, India is projected to be one of the fastest growing e-commerce sales market across the globe in 2022, and is projected to grow at around 20 to 25% in online channels for the next 5 years to 10 years, provided things goes well. While the total retail market in India is about $700 billion roughly at the moment, it is expected to grow faster than the world growth rate, which we have seen in previous slides, around 2 to 4%. India, on the other hand, expected to grow more than 10% in retail sales and in this decade, and expected to reach about maybe $2 trillion USD by 2030. As we move forward and understand the e-commerce share of the retail in terms of the number, and contribution is concerned, India is at a very lower base and has a very long room to grow in the next few years and decades. As of now, e-commerce share of retail stands at about 6.5% in India, at roughly about $48 billion, and is expected to reach to $130 billion US dollars in the next 5 to 7 years. That's roughly 2 to 3x jump in the next 5 years. That's massive kind of projections that we're talking about. This broadly in line with the previous estimates, where the offline retail is expected to grow more than 10%, and e-commerce is expected to grow at around 20 to 20%, much faster than the rest of the world. Considering that India is at much lower base in comparison, and the countries as the country's GDP and tech adoption grows, this is considered to be a very reasonably high probability that we're looking may happen. As we move forward, we did a broad research to understand how the top 15 to 20 listed companies fared pre and post pandemic, and how their margins, growth rate, and profitability has contracted during the pandemic year. What's interesting is that the growth rates for many of these companies pre-pandemic at a consolidated level looks at maybe roughly about 8 to 15, 20%, depending on the kind of company that we are looking at. Most of these companies saw a degrowth to roughly about minus 20 to minus 50% during the pandemic year. However, there are few outliers in this in the list, and a lot of these companies are having a lot of these outliers that we're talking about are the companies that are having decent online focus, or the brands that are established trust for many decades or years, with the likes of Titan, Page Industries, or Trident, which has more global presence, etc. However, on the other side of the coin, we have seen a lot of brands whose main focus is offline retail, and they thought the online side of the business is more of a sidekick income. They are bruised badly in the pandemic year, and kind of has to think their strategy 360 degrees and force them to come to online channel to survive. So that, and while the pandemic shock is kind of most brutal for the offline retail companies, most companies, as the financial year 21-22 is ended, most companies, most B2C companies, listed companies, and other companies has gone back to the pre-pandemic level growth rates. So with that, I would like to conclude a broad macro global perspective, and I hand it over to my colleague Sukesh to take us through some of the interesting observations on the online shopping behavior that he has seen for Indian consumer, and what Indian brands should do to win the consumer competitive race that we have. Over to you, Sukesh.
Thank you, Pavan, for those thought-provoking insights on what the e-commerce ecosystem has evolved, globally speaking. Well, these are definitely changing times. We've seen that happen of late, and it's fairly certain that we will continue to see such sustained growth in this space in the coming years as well. Just a quick reminder to everyone to keep the questions coming in. You may use the Q&A window or the chat window to post your questions, which we will go over towards the end of this webinar. So now that we've seen the trend at a fairly larger scale, right, globally speaking, let's use these next 5 to 10 or 15 minutes to drill down a little bit and take a look at how people in India are shopping. Let's start with stating something very obvious. The trends that we see globally definitely apply to India as well. And e-commerce or e-retail or online shopping is definitely here to stay. Well, I think we all know that. We all would have shopped, and I'm fairly certain, and I'm inclined to believe that most of us would have purchased something either from Amazon or Flipkart or Paytm or BigBasket or any other portals that might be on your phone or on the website. Something in the last 7 to 10 days. But personally speaking, from my experience, I'd be very surprised if I open my phone up right now and find out that I had placed less than 3 orders in the last 7 days. It's highly unlikely. I would have placed a lot more than that. Of course, having the advantage and comfort of making a purchase without even leaving the bed, that itself is incentive enough to prefer this medium, right, for all of us. So with that background and moving ahead a bit to another, well, obvious and fairly well-known statistic to all of us. Well, India has a population of around 1.4 billion people. But what's interesting to note is that India also has an internet penetration of about 47%. In other words, that means there are 658 million active internet users in the country. And that's a lot of people. What this means is that these 658 million, approximately 660 million users have the potential to purchase a product or a service online. Right? Could be in the form of app, making bookings on app, or purchasing products on Amazon, Flipkart, Walmart, or any other apps that support online delivery. Or for the matter, even WhatsApp shopping or Instagram shopping and various other media. Now, 658 million, well, that's more people than some countries' population. So that's a pretty big number. Let's drill down a little bit further and look at numbers from just the metros. Reports indicate that over 33% of the people are inclined to shop online or making use of some sort of e-commerce portal, in other words. Right? So, irrespective of which part of India people prefer shopping online, at least 33% of the people prefer shopping online. Now, of these cities, there's one that stood out prominently, with every other person having shopped online in the last 1 year. That's about 50% of the total population in that metro. Let's make this a little bit of an interaction. You should see a pop-up on your screen with a simple question and a few options. Please feel free to make an educated guess as to what you think, which city you think has the highest percentage of people shopping online in the last 1 year. We'll give this a few seconds for people to send in their answers. We see about 57% of the people have responded already. Okay, I guess that should be enough time. We'll end the poll. And well, I must say most of you did get it right. This results should be in front of your screens right now. And Bengaluru has about 1 in 2 people who have shopped online in the last 1 year. I'm guessing no surprises there. But what's interesting to note is that when you reduce the age limit of this entire survey sample set to people between 15 and 60, that number just goes up from 50 to over 70%. That's every 5 out of 7 people prefer shopping online. So those are very interesting data points for brands to have to understand how people shop across India. Now, we have discussed details about how people in metros shop. That doesn't mean that tier 2 cities or tier 3 cities are falling behind in any way. In fact, most reports indicate that smaller towns in India continue to turbocharge growth in the Indian e-retail. So the central map that you see, do not be fooled by the light gray color in the map. It just goes to show the potential that these places have, that much more potential to grow that much more faster. So moving on and drilling down into specific categories. There's going to be another quiz in front of your screen in just a couple of seconds. And what we'd like to understand is, in your opinion, which is that category which you think is the most popular when it comes to online shopping? Okay. So just launch the poll again, and let's give it a few more seconds to gather some answers. Let's keep the answers coming in. The initial trends show that everyone knows the answer, right answer. That's a good set of guesses. And I guess that should be enough. Let me end the poll and share the results again. Well, again, I would say a good set of estimates, guesstimates, or I'm hoping it's from knowledge or understanding of this ecosystem in space. Well, it is indeed fashion and apparel or clothing that tops charts. And interesting point to note is that all those who've chosen mobiles or accessories or electronics, well, not really wrong. All these 3 categories combined, reports indicate that over 95% of the PIN codes from India have placed orders from these categories, which means there is a lot of interest from pretty much all of India to shop for fashion, to shop for clothing, to shop for electronics like your TVs, washing machines, refrigerators, and of course mobiles, which has become more of a need than a want at this moment. So with all these interesting stats about how India shops online, many brands and people working with many brands must be wondering, what are those factors which play a role in an end consumer making a purchase online? So what do you think you as a brand can do to get that, to convert that visitor to a customer, to convert that a visit to a sale? Well, one thing that all brands need to work on and need to be aware of is to be visible to your end customer. That's a fairly obvious statement, right? Why we say it's important that you stay visible is that most brands usually have just under 10 minutes to win over a shopper. That means an average user spends approximately 10 minutes searching for a particular product before switching the entire search strategy that they have. So if your product is not visible in these 10 minutes, the chances of a sale drop drastically. Now, let's say a buyer lands up on your page, your product's page, or your brand's product PDP, as we call it. The reports indicate that product images or having a gallery is the next one that plays a vital role in the decision-making process. And products which actually have an image gallery usually have a higher chance of attracting the purchase. Why we say that? It's fairly simple. Over 50% of shoppers take their time out exclusively to visit the image gallery of a particular product. Now you translate that to the detailed description of a particular product, the stats don't look that great. Same report indicates that just 1 in 22 people read the detailed description. Now I'm going to bring in some more personal experience here. In the past, let's say 100 odd products that I would have purchased, I do not recall the last time I actually went through the product description in detail while making a purchase. Image gallery, well, that's a completely different story. Every single time I would have looked at each of these images to see what the product looks like. So with all this background about how people shop, what are those factors which influence a particular decision, and how many people actually look at it, a particular brand, their images, the description, and various other factors, and of course the price. Let's take a look at what brands can do to become and continue to stay the market leaders in their respective spaces. Okay. The most obvious one, of course, is moving into the e-retail. E-retail in general has been on the rise. But if there was one thing that the COVID-19 pandemic did to this entire ecosystem was to give it a super boost, if you want to call it that. For all the Marvel fans out there, it's like getting a shot of your super soldier serum. Consumer brands can no longer think of e-retail or e-commerce as just an optional. Your average consumer basically wants to shop from the comfort of a chair, a couch, sitting in front of a TV, watching a movie or a sitcom, or even playing a game on your Xbox or PlayStation or Nintendo, depending on what you prefer. So brands usually should think of strategizing in a way to bring in at least 20 to 30% of their sales via e-retail. That's a fairly obvious statement that all brands should think of moving to the e-commerce or e-retail space. And based on the current trends and the expected growth in the e-commerce industry, we can only expect this 20 to 30% number to just shoot up almost exponentially. Linear, it's a given, but an exponential growth is what is to be expected in the coming years. We've already seen this trend with a numerous set of digital-first D2C brands, which exclusively sell online, be it on websites or apps. And once they've cracked this whole selling online and e-retail strategy is when they gradually move on to a physical store. Right. So moving on to the next step, omnichannel has been a term that we have all been hearing about in the recent past. Right. So what exactly does omnichannel mean? Omnichannel retail or omnichannel commerce, as people may call it, is essentially a multi-channel approach to sales, which focuses on providing a fairly seamless customer experience, irrespective of where your client is shopping. The client could be shopping on a mobile device, the client could be shopping on a laptop, could be placing orders via WhatsApp, or they could be visiting your physical stores, your brick and mortar stores. Irrespective of which medium they use to make a purchase, providing that seamless and consistent experience across all these channels, all these put together, come together as your omnichannel retail or omnichannel commerce. In today's world, given how the internet penetration is just simply going up, everyone has access to mobiles with 2G, 3G, 4G connections, 5G connections coming up, ads all across the world. Consumers are discovering various new ways to find new brands. or existing brands for that matter. So think of Facebook, Instagram ads, think of your Google Shopping, think of Amazon. Amazon could have your simple product listing pages, could have your banners or various other marketplaces. Product information could spread through word of mouth and whatnot, right? So the idea is with the entire omni-channel commerce in place, be where your customers are. Do not differentiate between desktop computers, a television, a mobile app, shopping apps, or social media apps, or physical stores. The one thing all brands need to remember is all shoppers want the logistics of their lives to be as simple as possible. Simplicity is the key here. Now, well, not a favorite topic, but going back to the effect of COVID-19, another impact has been the democratization of the entire e-commerce ecosystem that is there. New brands are popping up every now and then in practically every category that you can think of. And for that matter, new categories are popping up every now and then, things that you might not have imagined, let's say 4 to 5 years ago. And as a result of this, established brands can no longer think about sitting on their brand name or past laurels. It's important to stay ahead of the curve. It's important to stay competitive. It's important to stay aware of what your competition is doing. Data-backed competitive analysis is not just an aspirational objective anymore. It's something that is extremely vital for brands to stay ahead of competition and curve. There is TVs of data on the web, which helps you understand your competition, which helps you stay competitive, which helps you stay ahead of the curve. It's important and it's vital for brands to make use of this data and perform the necessary competitive analysis to continue to be competitive. And well, coming with all this rise in e-retail is the fact that brands should now think, plan for, and spend a sizable amount on digital strategy. The goal of being visible to customers, I think, is something that most people connect with. If you go to your supermarket, you would tend to purchase something that's more at your eye level or just below the eye level rather than look for something that's at the lower shelf. Which is why there is a significant amount of competition for people to be visible at most people's eye level. Right? So this goal of being visible to customer doesn't change irrespective of whether this is that retail shelf in your local supermarket or a digital shelf in marketplaces where you're available. However, getting that much more visibility on the digital side without a well-planned digital strategy is going to be a tricky task. Capturing this real estate in a digital space will need a well-thought-out strategy and something that is accompanied by a sizable amount of digital spend. And last but not the least, and in fact, one of the most important things that you can do is be where the customer is and listen to what your customer is saying. Right? In the end, your customer is the one that is using the product. In the end, your customer is the one that you need to impress. So understand what the customer is talking about your brand, your product. Could be in the form of reviews on marketplaces, could be in the form of tweets on Twitter, could be in the form of posts on Instagram. Right? Understanding that customer sentiment and acting on that accordingly is a strategy that definitely should not be overlooked. Well, the image that you'll see on your screen right now was taken from a report released by Bain, which analyzed what different brands should be doing to evaluate their readiness to win online or in the e-commerce space. This has been categorized into 6 different levers, all of which come together and play an important role in ensuring not only is your brand's product visible to your end customers, but also that logistics of your shoppers' lives are kept as simple as possible. Remember, simplicity is the key. Your shoppers are looking for something that is not only just convenient and easy to use, but also is something that they can recall and recommend to their friends or family as well. Okay. So all of these steps can come together and help your brand succeed by ensuring that you continue to stay visible and keep your customers' lives simple. And don't worry too much about taking a screenshot of this slide. This entire presentation will be shared to all the participants of this webinar, along with the link to this video. Before we move on, I would like to take just a couple of moments and talk about a product that we at PromptCloud are in the process of launching soon. This particular product has been designed to address your needs with respect to digital shelf analytics or competitive analysis or even sentiment analysis, all backed by reliable web data that's publicly available. The terabytes of data that I was talking about just a while back. These sets of insights will be extremely useful in helping brands stay aware, stay alert, and of course, take the necessary actions to continue to stay competitive in this ever-evolving market. So should you be interested in testing this product out, please do not forget to share your details. We'll be sending out a form to the email addresses which you used to register for this webinar. Please share your interest via that form. So with that note, I think we'll move on to the final section of this webinar. It's back to Pavan, who will be talking about a few potential challenges in the space and a little bit about the hope in the space. Over to you, Pavan.
Sure. Thanks, Sukesh. Thanks for that. And I can safely say that the flipping of online with physical retail may not be an exception anymore, because we've seen a lot of digital first brands that are doing 80-90% of the sales online, and offline is one of their modes of growth beyond a certain point. Well, we've seen multiple dimensions to the Indian B2C story, which is all positive and hunky-dory, right? So I wish life was like that, without any potential challenges or roadblocks. So I'd like to put some cold water if many of us thinking like that. So what could be the potential roadblocks to this Indian B2C story? Before getting into the potential roadblocks, so we'd like to highlight a few data points that about the booming startup ecosystem and the unicorn valuations that many startups are commanding in the last few years. India at the moment, in terms of the unicorns are concerned, standard third place next to China and US. And if you look at the VC, venture capitalists and PE funding in the new age e-commerce startups in the last 1 year after the pandemic year, it's gone up nearly 21 times post-pandemic. That's a massive number. Why is it happening? Why is it the venture capitalists are punting so much on Indian e-commerce startup, and why are they so much extremely bullish on Indian consumer story? Well, it's all about the hope that the consumer will become big and everybody makes money in the future. But it's an interesting question to ask what makes India such an attractive bet from the venture capitalist perspective, and whether these valuations are sustainable in the future. There are a few potential roadblocks, a couple of them that we thought is very much has to come true for all the startup valuations and the B2C story to come true. Some of those are, one of those is the GDP per capita, which is a key macro factor for any country to be a kind of gold mine for consumer-focused companies to dig in. So but however, the hard fact about India is at the moment there are not many consumers to target for the B2C companies. If you look at the IT returns that are filed by people in different income groups, or number of people investing in the financial markets and mutual funds and etc., the target customers for B2C companies can safely say cannot exceed more than 40 to 50 million people. That's too less, considering for a large country like in India, where at least in terms of population is concerned. So the hope for the entire ecosystem, B2C ecosystem, is that the country keeps growing in terms of its GDP is concerned, so that many people go up the income ladder and have more disposable income to spend. GDP and per capita goes hand in hand. At the moment, India stands at the company of Bangladesh and Pakistan at around $2,000 per capita GDP, which I'm sure we're not proud of, which is actually far less. So the hope in the next few years is that as we look into the next 5 to 10 years, the GDP per capita income should reach to the sweet spot of roughly about $4,000 USD for the consumer economy to flourish, and all the B2C story that projections that many researchers are projecting to come true. This in our opinion is one of the key macro factor that has to come true. As we move forward to the next potential roadblock, anyone who is watching the financial markets at a distance must have heard inflation as a term umpteen times in the last few months, quarters, I guess. It's almost like a forgotten ghost that suddenly woken up and started haunting all the central banks and the governments and business across various verticals. The recessions and the growth phase cycles in any economy are like the day and night that generally happen to keep in check the bubbles that pop up during the euphoric phase. We have seen many euphoric phases in the past, whether it is in the dot-com crisis, if one is a little old to understand, or even during the 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, that entire period till 2007, before the GFC Great Financial Crisis is hit. And then something happens and some macro indication changes and the bubbles keep bursting after a period. So the recessionary phase and the growth phase are a part and parcel of the game. And also we have seen a lot of this article in the recent times that the inflation is at multi-decade high in Europe and USA and is threatening to go out of the control. When inflation is high, the only tool a central bank has to control, have in their kitty to control inflation is to rise interest rates and keep the demand in check, so that hopefully the inflation will bring down over a period of time. However, the bigger problem in Europe and US at the moment is that the delta between inflation and interest is so high, it is forcing the central banks to raise the interest rates rapidly to bring the inflation down. But one of the key factors that we all need to understand is that the market, especially the US and Europe, has been, after the 2008 crisis, habituated at a near 0% interest-free quantitative easy money, and these are the economies that are burdened with huge debt. And as interest rates goes up, and we don't know what kind of shocks pop up during when interest rates rise. It's like the famous quote Warren Buffett says, right? I mean, only when the tide goes out, you discover who's swimming naked. So, which has happened during the financial crisis, and it's almost like we're all blind men trying to predict the future. But the one thing is certain, that the uncertainty and volatility is here to stay next few quarters or a year maybe, and we need to wait and see how these markets react in the new environment where the era of free money is over and the big reset with respect to the monetary policies are concerned is happening as we speak. In an interconnected world, India can remain isolated in a global. India cannot remain isolated in a global degrowth or recession. We've seen in the past cycle, though we may be less affected, but it does not mean that we will not be affected at all. So whether we like it or not, India is one of the beneficiaries of this era of free money. A lot of the VC money came to India, resulting in a possible stratospheric valuation game that we are seeing in startups. A game that seems like difficult to beat in this big reset era that we are getting into. As the saying goes, I mean, if US sneezes, the world catches a cold in the financial markets. We just hope that the building blocks stay intact and in the next few years, and so that Indian B2C story will continue to flourish. That's broadly what it is. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time in attending this session, and like to hand it over to Raghu to see if you have any questions, and we'll be happy to take any questions. Please use the chat box or the question and answer box to let us know if you have any questions, or you can raise your hand and we'll be happy to unmute and have a discussion.
Well, thanks, Pavan and Sukesh. So level of the e-commerce, across the nations. And Sukesh, I personally loved those polls as well, where you mentioned across the category wise and, on the region wise as well. So that was really cool. We'll wait for some questions to come in. Please post your queries in the QA box or the chat window, and we can take it up now. All right. Finally, I see there's a question. Who want to check on how e-com brands, can leverage the data, and probably in terms of brand visibility, how the brands can spearhead their activities. Want to take this? Sukesh.
Thanks, Raghu. For some reason, I'm unable to see that question, but can you repeat that once again, please?
Yeah. So he wants to understand about how we can improve, how e-commerce brands can improve the visibility part, and how we can help them to or assist them into spearhead those activities.
Great. Well, to answer that, well, of course, we could definitely have a fairly lengthy discussion on its own webinar on its given the merit of that topic. But in essence, there are multiple ways you as a brand can be visible to your end customers. It's in the end the amount of real estate that you can capture for different categories, different search terms, and when a particular user is looking for a particular kind of product, you would want your brands to be visible there. So this is in a way fairly similar to how you would approach your search engine optimization, or SEO as people would call it. And content plays a major role, and along with, of course, the pricing, the availability, and the ratings of your particular product in that field. But keeping all of this aside, there is only so much that you can do with products of your particular brand. But on the flip side of it, one, as a brand, we need to be aware of what our competitors are doing as well. And that is where data from the web comes into play. Understanding which products are trending for different search terms, understanding what is the product catalog in different categories that you operate in, that you have competitors in, and understanding all this information and then converting this information into reliable analytics is what constitutes your usual digital shelf analytics or your share of voice understanding. And all of these put together can help you stay on top of the, stay on top of the curve, or actually stay ahead of the curve more than staying on top of the curve.
Awesome. I think that's a great answer, Sukesh. Thank you so much for that. Any other questions? All right. Well, I don't see any other questions over here, and I thank you everyone, for their time, and I thank the speakers as well, for their time and taking us through the entire e-commerce, the journey as well. So thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone for attending. Hope you have a great night. Stay safe.
Thanks everyone. Thank you much.